All this oil you see on this floor and all the oil in that pan came out from the intercooler and all the charge piping. As you guys can see, I got this Jetta in a million pieces in my shop. And let me just go ahead and tell you about why I had to do all this. This is a 1.8 liter turbocharged motor. These are pretty decent little cars, especially this one's a stick shift. But the turbo went bad in it, so I've gone ahead, taken that out. If you're doing this job yourself, the turbocharger is in the back, so you go back here, pull the exhaust manifold, pull the exhaust on the other side of the turbo down out of your way, and you can kind of start to get it out. And let me show you the turbocharger and what happened to it. So this here is the stock turbocharger for this car. It seems to appear to be a factory unit. This is a Borg Warner KO3 turbo, and I've actually had to do this job a few times now on these cars where these turbos go bad. But this one is in particular the worst failure of a turbocharger I've seen. You know, it's not obvious if this is a OEM turbo or not to me, because it looks exactly the same. There are some weird things about it though. I'm kind of curious if you guys can tell me if this is an OEM turbo or if this one was a Chinese one or what, because I have not seen one fail this bad. I've seen a lot of these turbochargers fail, and I've worked on a lot of them, but this is an extreme case. So basically, you know, one thing that's weird to me is this weld does not look like something you would see come out of a factory, especially here. If you can see on the camera, the whole shaft broke off it in half. So this is the exhaust side of the shaft with the exhaust side wheel on it, so the turbine, I guess you would call it. And yeah, it looks like, if I had to guess, it broke off smack dab in the middle of it. That shaft runs inside a bearing and it's all cooled by oil, so it takes oil pressure from the motor, and the shaft sits in these bearings and it spins in oil to keep it cool. This one is also liquid cooled and oil cooled, so it has oil lines and water lines to it. So what happens is like when I took this apart, that wheel and that shaft were all the way down into the catalytic converter, and I had to take it out from there. And so without that in there, there's nothing to hold the oil inside of it. It allows the oil to pass into the exhaust housing and into the compressor housing, which leads to the intake on the motor. With that shaft broken, the other side wheel also will fall forward and allow oil to pass. So let's go through the extent of the damage, because this thing has made a real mess of my shop just being in here. So the first thing we gotta look at is back here at the exhaust pipe. This was the most immediate mess that we had. So it was pouring oil in through that turbo so bad it was just coming out of the exhaust, especially once I jacked up the front of the car to work on it. Even more poured out. So yeah, I've got that back here, and if we come up to the front, that's where the serious carnage is. This pan, I drained the oil from the motor before I started working on it, because the oil line and everything, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't gonna make too big of a mess. So I drained the motor oil and everything, and then I drained this pan out after I did that. And I figured that the intercooler and everything was gonna have oil in it, since it seemed to be dripping a little bit on the other side of the turbo as well. And so I went ahead and pulled this intercooler off to wash it out, try and see what I can do about getting, you know, all this residual oil out. As soon as I dropped it down and took the boot off it, it poured all over the floor. And I had this pan sitting here, but you know, you don't really anticipate it having that much oil in it. All this oil you see on this floor and all the oil in that pan came out from the intercooler and all the charge piping. That's how much oil was in this. I don't even know how all that can hold that much. I mean, I guess it makes sense because, you know, you got all these, like, what, 3-inch inner diameter pipes. So if those all fill with oil and if they all hold it, then yeah, I guess. I mean, obviously it did. But yeah, this is a huge mess. Trying to throw up some speed dry stuff here. But I wanted to try and catch a video of how bad this is before I cleaned it up so you could see what I'm talking about. This is an excessive amount of oil. And the fact that there was this much oil in all the charge piping, this is more than the capacity of the engine just that came out of the charge piping. So this means that somebody was just putting oil in it and driving it with the turbo like that and just putting oil in it, putting oil in it, putting oil in it. And as fast as they were putting oil in it, it was just pouring it back out. Like I said, that pan was empty before I took the charge piping off. That's all oil from the charge piping and not even all the oil made it in there. Look at my floor. You know, there's no way that a reasonable person would anticipate there being that much oil coming out because, like I said, this is more than what the engine even holds. So you wouldn't think that there could be that much oil. But when somebody goes and they're trying to use their car when it's not running correctly and adding oil to it all the time, that's what can happen. You know, you don't know what the last person did. And unfortunately, the guy that I got this car from got himself in a bad position with the previous owner because this was a problem that was ongoing from what I can tell because this turbocharger had definitely been taken off in the recent past. Most of the bolts were not tight to spec and many of the bolts were missing. So I don't know, I'm gonna have to go to the junkyard and try and figure out what bolts I need and try and get to them. And it's a nightmare, man. I mean, it's not a hard job. It's just a mess. So, I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do here, but I mean, just put a turbo in it, I guess. I have a brand new one for it, a Chinese one, and I know what people have to say about Chinese turbos, you know, but it's got to be better than this, right? So we'll try it. An OEM used Borg Warner KO3 turbo is like $250. So I got a brand new aftermarket Chinese one for $130. It literally cannot possibly be worse than this. So we'll give her a shot and I'll come back with a video to tell you if it's any good or not. And that should probably speak to the quality of most other Chinese turbos as well. You know, I've heard hit or miss. You know, if you guys have tried a Chinese KO3 for a stock replacement, I'd be interested to know how it worked out for you. It's not going to be under a lot of stress because it's just a stock vehicle. I will be changing all the exhaust, and I'm just going to put aftermarket exhaust on it because the the used OEM exhaust from the junkyard would have ended up costing about $225, and I could buy a whole brand new stainless steel aftermarket exhaust on Amazon for $175, and that's everything from the downpipe. It has a test pipe that replaces the cat, and it has the whole muffler set up. So I'm just gonna do that because I know that I took the catalytic converter out and it poured oil all over the place. That thing was full. The muffler's full. That muffler is like just basically a big saucepan. So you know you'll never get all the oil out of it. The last one that I did, I had a terrible time trying to get all the oil out of the exhaust. I mean, I took all the exhaust off it, sprayed it out with water, everything, and it took like a whole tank of gas before it stopped smoking. And these things, when these turbos go, they are so bad that you can't even drive it down the road because it's just gonna smoke so bad. So I'm just not even gonna do that. I'm just gonna do everything I can to mitigate the amount of oil that's sitting anywhere that it can smoke. Obviously, there's places I can't do much about. In particular, the intake manifold. I am not going to take off this intake manifold. It probably isn't too horrible to do, but I'm just not feeling it. If you like this video, if you found it interesting or informative to you, or just crazy, because that's what it is, it's a crazy situation. This should never ever happen. But if you like it, please subscribe for more. Give it a thumbs up if you're already subscribed. Get any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.